Welcome back. Okay, last time we were together, we were reading on chapter 17. Excuse me. And when we last left off, our main character was being chased down by two vicious rottweilers, and Justin was running for his life. His bike got completely destroyed. It flipped up and over on his bike, and tire ended up flat as a pancake. He heard some whooshing sounds and realized it was cars. He could hear cars driving by. So he headed that direction. Remember, he was out in the middle of the woods. And then a car came past, and he looked like she could be maybe somebody's grandma, and he asked for a ride and got inside the car. Of course, there was a small fluffy white dog, but Max just hopped up in the back seat, and he said, "Ma'am, may I borrow your phone?" And then she said, "Sure, honey." She dug around in her purse, and Justin smiled at her, and off they drove, away from the Rottweilers, away from Stack, and most importantly, away from Tyler. And that brings us to chapter 18 in Max. Chu's eyes looked as if they were going to pop out of his head. $450, he repeated, astonished. "And 47 cents, said the woman behind the counter at the emergency veterinarian's office. "For dog stitches?" Chu asked. "I'd hate to hear what you'd charge for a human." "Chu," Carmen said from where she was kneeling next to Max, "the important thing is that Max is okay." Max's head was framed by a wide plastic cone that had been attached to his neck. It was to keep him from licking at his wound while they healed, but it made him look like an alien. Carmen ran her hand over Max's head and gave him a gentle scratch behind the ears. "Right, Max?" Justin nudged Chu aside and arranged his facial features into what he hoped were a pathetic, helpless expression. "Ma'am, I'm sorry. Can you give us a second?" he said to the receptionist. The woman nodded. Justin turned to Chu. "How much did your mom give you?" he asked. "Give me?" Chu said. "She didn't give me jack. This is my life savings." "Your life savings is $100, Justin said before he could stop himself. Chu looked insulted. "You don't want it, man? That's cool with me." No, that's not what I meant," Justin backpedaled. "Sorry, yes, thank you, I'll take it." Justin took the cash Chu reluctantly handed over. He added it to the $200 he had in his pocket from Emilio. He handed it to the woman, who just shook her head. "I'm sorry, we can't release Max without full payment. I'm going to have to call your parents." "Please, ma'am, don't do that," Justin pleaded. "I'm good for the rest, I promise. I'll give you my phone number and home address so you can find me. I just need time to figure out what to tell my dad, that's all." He paused for effect and tried the sad face again. "Please." She pursed her lips and studied him for a moment. Finally, she nodded and took the money from his hand. "Okay." Justin exhaled a sigh of release. "Thank you so much," he said. Then, turning to Chu and Carmen, he said under his breath, "What am I going to tell my dad?" "If this has anything to do with Emilio," Chu cautioned as he headed for the parking lot, Max walking gingerly between them, "then nothing." "I can't do that," Justin replied. Chu stepped in front of him and stopped him in his tracks. "Jay, listen to me. That dude is crazy. Family doesn't mean anything to him, and you're not even family. Trust me." Justin didn't say anything. "Fine," Chu added, "but if you care about me and Carmen at all, leave us out of it." Exhausted, Justin and Max headed up the driveway towards the backyard. Justin had never been so happy to be home. From the looks of it, Max felt the same way. The moment they stepped into the yard, though, Max started barking like crazy. Justin led him to his cage and nudged him inside. "What's up, pal?" Justin asked in surprise. Max growled and yelped some more. Justin didn't have any choice but to shut the cage door and lock it. "You just need some rest, Max. We both do," he said. Justin headed inside as Max continued making lots of noise. The barking was setting Justin on edge, although he was already pretty tense. Justin knew that he couldn't let Tyler and Emilio go through with the sale of those guns without trying to stop it. But there was no doubt in his mind that Tyler and Stack, not to mention Emilio and those scary Spanish-speaking dudes, would hurt whoever tried to get in their way. As far as Justin could tell, he only had one thing going for him, at least for the moment. They didn't know it had been him and Max in the woods. It was a dangerous situation, and Justin wasn't sure what to do. He should probably call the sheriff or something. He stepped inside the house through the sliding back door. It was weirdly quiet. Normally his mom was home by now cooking dinner, but she wasn't in the kitchen. Nothing was on the stove. "Mom?" he called out. "In here, Justin," his mom responded. Her voice sounded funny. Justin stepped into the living room and found his mom perched on the couch looking upset. Next to her, with a smug look on his face, sat Tyler. Fear shot through Justin's body, and he looked away from Tyler. He wanted to turn around, grab Max, and bolt, but he couldn't. "What have you done, Justin?" Justin's mom asked in a stern voice. He could tell she was torn between disappointment and worry. "What have I done?" he asked, genuinely confused. "Tyler told me what Max did to the deputy sheriff's dog," he replied. Tyler tilted his head ever so slightly, his eyes locking on Justin. As he waited for him to reply, Justin could still hear Max barking in the yard. This was what his dog had been trying to warn him about. "I don't know what he's talking about," Justin said. It was the truth. His mind raced, trying to catch up with this information. He knew Tyler was trying to pull something, but he couldn't figure out what any deputy sheriff had to do with it. Then Justin had the odd sensation that someone was watching him from behind. He turned slowly to see Stack, dressed in a tan sheriff's uniform, a shiny metal badge pinned to his barrel chest, a service revolver hanging from a leather belt slung around his hips, lurking in the corner of his living room. The man's head practically touched the ceiling. He was so tall and wide, Justin's blood went cold and his palms got clammy. Max was still yowling away outside. Stack nodded at him. Justin noticed that one of his giant, meaty hands was wrapped in a bloody bandage. Justin couldn't help but hope that Max had inflicted that wound, and that it was a particularly nasty one. "Don't lie to me, Justin." His mom's voice was quiet but steady. It was the way she sounded when she was really, really angry. "Don't you dare lie." Stack stepped forward, his eyes fixed on Justin. His whole demeanor had changed from just a few hours earlier. He was in full sheriff mode now. So much for calling the authorities, Justin thought. Stack was the authorities. There I was, just having a few off-duty beers with my buddy Tyler, Stack said, when wham, one of my dogs get pounced on by your dog. He tipped his head menacingly towards Justin. My poor rottweiler didn't know what hit him. He held up his bandaged hand. Your dog got me pretty good too when I tried to break it up. Stack took another step toward Justin. Justin forced himself to stay put. I had to put him down. My own dog. Stack paused. He looked upset. Was it possible the monster actually had feelings? What your animal did, that's assault, son. The law says that your family is liable for whatever he does, but I'll drop any charges if you just put him down now. Justin struggled to keep his expression neutral. Stack and Tyler were both lying, and worse, his mom believed them. His nostrils flared as he tried to steady his breathing and get his emotions under control. He wasn't going to let anything happen to Max, no matter what Stack and Tyler had to say about it. The truth is, Stack said, lowering his voice, he's going to be put down either way. Justin swallowed hard. Max moved on from barking to howling. Max wasn't near your dog, Justin said, hoping he sounded more certain than he felt. Neither Stack nor Tyler responded. Instead, Stack stepped into the foyer and returned, clutching Justin's mangled bike in one hand. It looked like a toy in his massive grip. Found this bike near my place, Stack said. It's yours, isn't it? Justin cursed silently. Well, Justin, is it? Justin's mom demanded. What could Justin say that would make all this go away? His mind leaped from one option to the next. But for once, he couldn't think of anything that would make this better. Anything he could only make it worse. Tyler stood up from the couch. Justin, Tyler said in his fake friendly voice he always used whenever Kyle and Justin's parents were around, why don't you and I have a little talk in the other room, man to man? Tyler turned and gave Justin's mom a smile and nod, as if to reassure her that he could be Justin's big brother in Kyle's absence. Her eyes filled with tears, and she smiled gracefully at Tyler. Justin wanted to kick the man in the shins, but he followed him upstairs to his bedroom instead. Max was still barking and yelping like a maniac outside. Tyler shut Justin's bedroom door firmly behind him. He pulled a massive gun from his waistband and held it up, waving it in front of Justin. Know what this is, kid? Justin didn't answer. This is a really, really nice gun. You know how much it's worth? Again, Justin said nothing. Around here, $600. $600 at the mall. Know what it's worth over the border in Mexico? Justin waited. He stared at the wall over Tyler's shoulder. He wasn't going to let Tyler intimidate him, even if that gun made him pretty nervous. Just a shade over $3,000. Tyler stashed the gun in his back in his waistband of his jeans, again and under his jacket. Kyle wouldn't give Emilio the time of day, you know, but I do business with him. Tyler stepped forward until he was just inches from Justin, looming over him. And so do you. Justin cringed. He shouldn't have been surprised that Tyler knew he sold bootlegged video games to Emilio, but he was. That's right, Tyler said, clearly enjoying Justin's reaction. Kyle and I found out about your little side business on our last leave. Kyle was going to tell your dad, but I talked him out of it. Word of honor. See, kid, you and I are more alike than you and Kyle ever were. The suggestion that he and Tyler had anything in common filled Justin with disgust and rage. It took every ounce of self-control he had to keep from punching Tyler in the face. But Justin knew that, as good as it would feel for a split second, it would only cause more trouble in the end. Why don't you leave Max out of it? Justin finally said. If it was up to me, Tyler said, his voice oozing with insincerity, believe me, I would. But Stax is steamy mad at your dog, and you don't want to mess with him when he's mad. That is one bad man down there. And the guys we're in business with, they're even badder. Tyler grinned like the danger was part of the fun. Then his voice took an ominous tone. You want front row seats at a couple more family funerals? Tyler's words sank into Justin's brain. He was threatening Justin's parents. Justin locked eyes with Tyler. That's right, kid, Tyler went on. Stack knows where you live now. He knows who your parents are. Things go bad on this deal, and I'm sure he won't be shy about telling your business partners who's responsible for that. He poked Justin hard in the chest with one finger, but Justin didn't budge. I might not like it, but I can't say that I blame him. Business is business, right? Tyler leaned down until he and Justin were nose to nose. Your mom and dad are like family to me, kid, so do us all a favor and keep your mouth shut. Justin kept his gaze zeroed in on Tyler. After a moment, he mustered up the ability to speak. Did Kyle know about your business? My business? I'm just a little fish in a big pond. Tyler's tone had taken on a hint of disdain, like he was being forced to explain something obvious to a child. The big fish sells weapons all over the world and make a lot of money doing it. Then they send wide-eyed hicks like me and Kyle out there to get shot at with those very same weapons so they can cry big crocodile tears, salute the flag, and sell more. Tyler paused, and Justin struggled to absorb what he'd heard. He couldn't bear the image of Kyle getting shot by weapons just like the ones Tyler was selling to Emilio guys. Kyle wanted to be a hero, Tyler went on. Look where that got him. From the expression on Tyler's face, he knew he had hit a nerve with Justin. Me? I'm a realist. I know how the world really works. He steadied his gaze on Justin. Which one are you going to be? Justin couldn't believe how quickly the animal control guys got to the house. He yanked on Max's leash, practically dragging the reluctant dog to the curb. A van idled at the bottom of the driveway, its back doors open wide to reveal a large metal crate. Two handlers with long poles stood on either side of the van. At the end of each pole was a soft loop for corralling a wild dog around the neck. Max was not a wild dog. He whimpered at Justin's side, but reluctantly obeyed. He tried to dig his paws into the ground, but his claws just slipped along the concrete. It broke Justin's heart to watch him struggle. He couldn't explain to Max what was happening. He just had to hope that in some small way Max understood. Justin would never be able to forgive himself for sacrificing Kyle's dog, his dog, this way, but he would never be able to live if anything happened to his parents. He didn't have a choice. Stack, Tyler, and Justin's mom stood by the front door watching from a distance. Justin and Max reached the van, and Max tried even harder to pull away. Come on, Max, Justin commanded. Be a good boy. Up. It was almost as if Max just gave up. At the sound of Justin's voice, his whole body went slack, and he stopped fighting. He hopped into the van and slinked into the crate, his head and tail hanging low. Justin felt as though his heart was cracking into two pieces, seeing the dog behind bars. I'm sorry, Max, he choked out, his voice breaking. Tears filled his eyes. You deserve better than this. I don't know what else to do. Please understand. Justin stepped back, struggling to keep it together in front of all these people. He turned to one of the handlers. How long before, until you... He couldn't finish the sentence. The man gave him a sympathetic look. 48 hours, he said. Then he shut the van doors with a heavy thump. He couldn't watch the van pull away. It was too much. Justin pushed Tyler, Stack, and his mother and headed into the house. He slammed the front door behind him. He looked out the window and saw Tyler putting his arm around his mom's shoulders, comforting her. Tyler was a snake, a dangerous, scheming, lying snake, and there was nothing he could do about it. Justin felt as defeated as Max. Justin's busted-up bike lay in the middle of the living room. He kicked at it in frustration, stomping on the spokes while they cracked, wishing desperately that he was kicking at Tyler's head. Suddenly, it became crystal clear to Justin what he needed to help him out of this situation. He needed Kyle. Kyle would know what to do. Kyle would know what to say. Kyle wouldn't be so scared that he'd back down and send Max off to die. Justin let out an angry yell as he destroyed what was left of his tires. He was interrupted by the ringing phone. He ignored it until an answering machine picked up and he heard a familiar voice on the line. Hello, Mr. and Mrs. Wincott. This is Sergeant Reyes over at Maitland. Justin stormed into the kitchen and snatched the phone from the cradle. Hello? He said. Hi, Justin. Is that you? It's Sergeant Reyes. I have some information for you. I followed up on what we talked about when you were here, and Justin had nearly forgotten about their last conversation. Now it was too late and too dangerous to do anything about it. Sergeant, I don't think he started to say before Reyes cut him off. Justin, this is important, Reyes said. Tyler Harney's service record is officially protected by privacy laws. but I talked to some people, and I want to tell your parents. No, Justin interrupted. No way. Son, this is serious business I'm talking about here. No one could prove anything, but Harney was busted for falsifying field reports. You told me he's been lying to your father. I just want to tell your parents they deserve to know, Justin. Justin started to panic. If Reyes told his parents about Tyler's lies, then his dad would confront Tyler, for sure. And nothing good would come of that. His mom and dad would be in real danger. He had to stop Reyes from telling them anything. If you tell my parents, Justin said, trying to sound as forceful as he could, I'll tell your bosses you gave me a confidential training video. Reyes was silent on the other end of the line. Justin, he finally said, his voice laced with concern. Are you all right? I'll tell them you gave me even more classified stuff, but I threw it away because I was scared of getting in trouble. I mean it. I'll swear to it. Justin, Reyes pleaded. Don't call here again, Justin snapped before hanging up the phone. And that is where we end this chapter. Stay tuned. Next week, chapter 19. See you next week.